Ever since I was a small boy in Illinois, I've had a great personal admiration for Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln was born February 12, 1809, in a small log cabin in LaRue County, Kentucky, against the outer limits of the ever-expanding American frontier. Born into hardship in a home plagued by death, he educated himself in pursuit of an escape to the fruitless drudgery found on the prairie, with an ambition to make a difference in the growing nation of the United States. Lincoln, tall and well-spoken, had a passion for knowledge and a passion for justice. This can be witnessed throughout his varied career as he saw success in the Illinois House of Representatives and continued achievement as a Springfield lawyer, overseeing and winning countless cases ranging from railroad conflicts to criminal defense. Lincoln was a profound orator, his speech was distinguished, and when he spoke, people stopped to listen. These ventures, along with the supportive and persuasive voices around him, led him to seek the highest office in the land, that of President of the United States of America. Against tense opposition in a country still figuring out what it wanted to be, Lincoln won the 1860 presidential election decisively. During his tenure as the 16th Commander-in-Chief, he would bring the country through its darkest and most challenging passageways. Leading the way, Lincoln raised the guiding light of liberty and freedom for all mankind. Amidst great protest, division, and casualty, his powerful words of wisdom and leadership held the nation together. He served with an admirable disposition, an honorable dignity, and a bold humility until his season was ended by an actor's bullet in 1865. Long before his untimely demise, Abraham Lincoln had certainly solidified his placement among those of the greatest American heroes. He would be sealed within history, remembered and celebrated for the accomplishment he achieved, the struggles he overcame, the brilliance of his rhetoric, the warmness of his demeanor, and the ideal of liberty and justice for all, for which he so strongly represented. 21 years later, another American icon of a much different degree would enter the arena. Walter Elias Disney was born amidst the national hubbub of Lincoln's 100th birthday. These days would have seen several nationwide events and commemorations, as in the subsequent years, construction on the Lincoln Memorial would have officially begun and commonplace reminders of Honest Abe, like the Lincoln penny, would be introduced. Gone over 40 years, Lincoln was the apple of America's eye more than ever, and he was placed in regard no higher than that of Illinois native and young boy, Walt Disney. A youthful Walt was captivated by Abraham Lincoln. He studied the man, he pored over his history, he memorized his words. One year upon the celebration of Lincoln's birthday, a 10-year-old Walter would enter his 5th grade classroom in Kansas City, Missouri. Dressed up in full presidential regalia, complete with a glued-on woolly beard and a childishly manufactured stovepipe hat. To the amazement of his teacher, Walt went before the class and presented the Gettysburg Address in its entirety from memory to his fellow students. Walt gleamed with a respectful intensity, accenting the words and conducting his movements, giving the perfect punctuation to each one of the powerful sentences in Lincoln's dignified eulogy. Walt's teacher was astonished. She promptly took him by the hand and led him directly to the school's principal's office, where she excitedly requested an encore performance. The principal, a lover of history, was equally impressed and took Walt to each classroom of Benton Elementary School, where he would confidently recite the famous address to each of his peers. Walt Disney would do this for every following year he attended the school. Each year, Walt would gain confidence in his performance, learning more about presentation and the person of Lincoln himself, making every display better and more nuanced than the last. Perhaps these are the roots of Disney entertainment, as Walt's knack of showmanship and storytelling and even exhibitions featuring Abraham Lincoln himself can find their roots as far back as then. Even as a child, Walt Disney, a true American patriot, held President Lincoln with the highest devotion. This was more than just a kid dressing up in a beard to elicit laughs from his classmates. It was a respectful memorial to a man who was carving a young boy's broadening worldview.
Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America.
So when the dream of Disneyland became a reality, it was only a matter of time before Abraham Lincoln would make his way there as well. Walt's original vision for Mr. Lincoln would be found in 1958 amidst an unfinished expansion off of Main Street, USA called Liberty Street. This section of the park would have been an homage to colonial America, featuring immersive, era-appropriate architecture, costumed cast members, and an attraction focused on the signing of the Declaration of Independence. However, the centerpiece of the area would have been a hall of presidents featuring a likeness of each of the, at the time, 34 presidents. The attraction would be called One Nation Under God. Walt reached out to his then animator Blaine Gibson and requested he begin sculpting the busts of the previous American leaders to be used within this attraction. They juggled about which of the former presidents to begin with. Washington, perhaps a Roosevelt or two, but unsurprisingly the first head of state to receive the sculpting treatment would be that of Abraham Lincoln, who now, nearly a century after his passing, was still one of the most familiar and recognizable of the past American presidents. The ambition for One Nation Under God was more than what the current technology and funding could provide. An attraction of this magnitude would still be a ways out, and the subsequent expansion in the other lands of the park led to the ultimate cancellation of Liberty Street. But the development of the President's Project remained steadfast, implementing the latest in electronics as they became available. Slowly but surely, testing would officially begin on the Mr. Lincoln audio-animatronic. In 1962, Robert Moses, who was the head of the 1964 World's Fair, came to WED Enterprises. Walt toured him around the facility and showed him the growth that some of the pavilions Disney was already working on for General Electric and Ford were experiencing. During the tour, Walt passed Moses by the Mr. Lincoln prototype animatronic, and Moses was completely astounded, stating he wouldn't open the fair without the inclusion of the President's attraction. The production needs time-wise for One Nation Under God were just not feasible with the World's Fair only months away, and even having the single president ready by fair time was rather bold. But with the additional funds incoming through a sponsorship with the State of Illinois Pavilion, and a now deliberate focus on Abraham Lincoln himself, Walt carelessly obliged, biting at the chance to really pour everything Imagineering had into his personal American hero.
So when we decided to recreate some of the great moments in Mr. Lincoln's life for the World's Fair, we directed all our energies to that task. We wanted to bring to the people of today the inspiring words of the man who held this nation together during its moment of greatest crisis.
The show premiered at the World's Fair on April 22, 1964. It ran at the fair for the entirety of both of its 6-month runs. Despite opening some philosophical doorways like a man-made robot believably portraying a real-life and respected human being, audiences were nevertheless convinced that Abraham Lincoln was truly there in the room with them, and it became the ultimate highlight for the entire fair. Walt was simply delighted, and in 1965, Mr. Disney would welcome Mr. Lincoln to his neck of the woods.
Well, if I had it to do over again, I think, no, I don't think I would. I don't know. I hope I don't have to do it over again.
The year is 1965, and audiences are heading to the theater where the hills are certainly alive with the sound of music. Folks back home are finding that actually Green Acres is the place to be as the Farmingtown sitcom makes its television debut. And the lovable and pokeable half-man, half-raw-bred mystery of nature, the Pillsbury Doughboy, pops into existence. And Disneyland is celebrating its 10th anniversary. The celebration was coined the Tencennial Year, and it brought about a lot of festivities around the park. A majority of these events were showcased in a special episode of the Disneyland television show now called Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. The program presented the celebrations going on via interesting musical numbers, and it featured a quick look back on Disneyland's already storied history, and it offered some exclusive looks at new attractions soon to come.
And then in here, we have a special attraction. We call it the Blue Bayou Lagoon. People are going to get on a boat here and ride through the lagoon, and then as they get around here, we're going to take them down a waterfall.
The program also served as the introduction to the first Disneyland ambassador, Julie Ream. Walt Disney was a very busy fellow. He was running a theme park, an animation, television, and movie studio, and of course, he treasured himself a family man. As a public figure, his appearance was in high demand, and he would be invited to functions, galas, and more all around the world. In order to appease some of these requests, Walt initiated the Disneyland Ambassador Program. The main role of the Disneyland Ambassador was to be a, quote, personification of Disneyland's world-famous spirit of friendliness and happiness. It was to be a sort of extension of Walt himself. Julie Ream was a perfect fit, and on behalf of Walt and Disneyland, her first year as the Disneyland Ambassador took her all over the world, attending film premieres, accepting awards, and promoting the Disneyland park and brand. Disneyland in just a decade had already accomplished so much. It was seeing a regular attendance of over 6 million guests, and America and the world were excited to be a part of the action. Walt Disney was quoted during a Tencennial celebration saying that Disneyland was just getting started. And he was right. Throughout the year, the world would turn its eyes to Central Florida as a slew of mysterious buyers are semi-anonymously purchasing thousands of swampy acres between Orlando and Kissimmee. 40 square miles, a space double the size of Manhattan Island. The state is curious because its location is perfectly ideal for something, as it's placed right at the intersection of many of Florida's main highways and is in close proximity to the Orlando Airport, then known as McCoy Air Force Base. While the rest of the world speculated, only a handful of people were truly in the know. It's true that Walt Disney and Company were shopping for land, a new home for Walt's latest enterprise. Over the course of many months and under the pseudonym company names like the I-4 Corporation, Bay Lake Properties, Reedy Creek Ranch, and more, the Disney Company began purchasing lots of land. By keeping these land deals somewhat anonymous, it kept the Disney name out of the picture, mostly under the assumption that if the community knew a big corporation like Disney was interested, local landowners would have surely hiked up the price. Even within the company there was secrecy. Only a dozen people or so knew the long-term plan. This smattering of associates was able to make quiet trips to Central Florida to procure some land for as little as $100 an acre. But bit by bit, as the land is quickly obtained, the nation becomes quickly interested. Many suggestions fly about as to who these mystery buyers could be. Ford Motor Company, NASA, even the Walt Disney Company would be suggested from time to time. As the purchases became official, as the paperwork became finalized, the Disney Company began slowly incorporating these proxy businesses. The plan was to unveil the Florida project to the world sometime in the future. But on October 24th, a sleuthing journalist for the Orlando Sentinel publishes a headline, making a predictive claim that the mystery buyer is in fact the Walt Disney Company. So, who leaked the story? Well, it may have been Walt himself, who in an interview he gave covering the Disneyland Tencennial seemed to oddly have a lot of familiarity about Central Florida. This reporter made an educated guess and the secret was out, and the prices for local land skyrocketed. Suspicions over Disney are confirmed the next day on October 25th as the governor of Florida, Hayden Burns, makes it official to his constituents in Miami, Florida. The Florida project is officially announced in a November 15th press conference in the Egyptian Room of the Cherry Plaza Hotel in Orlando, as Walt is joined with the governor and his big brother Roy to reveal the beginning stages of Walt's next pursuit. Walt played coy when prompted for specific details.
Well, at this stage, Governor, it's hard to spell it all out. The Disneyland operation is unique, and out of the 10 years experience at Disneyland, we've learned an awful lot. But we have many things in mind that could make this unique and different than Disneyland.
Will it be at Disneyland?
Well, I've always said there will never be another Disneyland, Governor, and I think it's going to work out that way, but it will be the equivalent of Disneyland.
While an East Coast Disneyland is certainly a part of the plan, Walt has a bigger, grander, impressive, and revolutionary project in mind for the space. He would unveil those concepts to the world soon. But one thing was for sure, a magical kingdom of Disney's design was officially in the works, and it would take the lessons learned from Disneyland to bring another kind of Disney entertainment to the country. The amount of space purchased ensured that this new installation would be fully under company control and would lead to unlimited expansion possibilities in and for the future.
But I'm very excited about it because I've been storing these things up over the years, and certain attractions at Disneyland that have a basic appeal, I might move here. And again, I would like to create new things. You hate to repeat yourself. I don't like to make sequels to my picture, but I like to take a new thing and develop something, a new concept. So that's about the only way I can put it, Governor.
Abraham Lincoln was an American icon. Not only would his words be immortalized via the written speeches and historical documents he left behind, but they would also find their way to various corners of popular culture as well, via artwork and literature or the stage and screen. Ironically, countless actors over the years had brought the person of Lincoln to life for millions of viewers. He was a respected figure, and each performance would elevate the revered and safeguarded status of the man. However, Every actor was different, and they would display the president in their own way, in their own interpretation. A long-lasting stage show featuring an actor in the role of Abraham Lincoln would lack perfect consistency. Each performance would be unlike, if only slightly, than the one before it. Not including the fact that actors need coffee breaks and prefer to go home at night. These simple realizations confirmed the idea of the Mr. Lincoln animatronic. The presentation could be programmed to deliver the right moves and hit the right tones perfectly every single time. The audio animatronic would be able to blend the consistency offered via recorded film and the compelling power of live theater, combined with an authentic depiction of the president found only in painted artwork and true-life photographs. So now, with the deadline of the World's Fair impending, Imagineering had their work cut out for them. They needed to have a working and believable Mr. Lincoln figure ready in time for the opening of the fair, fast approaching within the next 2 years. As far as audio animatronics, testing and development were in an ebb and flow, but at the time the only reliably working example were those of the singing enchanted Tiki Room birds. A profile of Lincoln would be a whole different ballgame. There was a lot on the line for Disney. If the show wasn't anything short of perfect, it may be conceived as a desecration of the man rather than the revered commemoration that Walt was pining for. Mr. Lincoln would be the first full-bodied human audio animatronic ever. First, Imagineers needed to construct the figure in which to place the mechanics needed to operate the show. Another flaw with actors is that they all tend to look different. Movie makeup and lighting can only go so far, but with audio animatronics, Imagineering would be able to shape a performance with perhaps the closest resemblance to the true man and president himself. Disney was able to obtain an actual life mask of Abraham Lincoln taken in 1860. This was delivered to sculptor and Disney Imagineer Blaine Gibson, who was able to make a fiberglass mold from it. With the assistance of numerous photos taken of Lincoln, with photography being a brand new medium at the time of his presidency, Gibson was able to have a perfect reference point of Lincoln from almost every single angle, and thus was able to create one of the most accurate representations of Abraham Lincoln ever realized. The construction of the animatronic interior for Mr. Lincoln was overseen by Mr. Audio Animatronic himself, Imagineer Walthall Rogers. This was done using similar steps as the small tiki birds via hydraulic and pneumatic valves, but was expanded for Mr. Lincoln to cover an extremely wide range of motion. Every single move had to be programmed. Countless hours of rehearsals and tweaking and reworking ensured that everything about Mr. Lincoln was perfect. Walt would be checking in on the project frequently. He himself directed every little movement, from head nods to finger curls to eye direction. Walt felt it important that special attention be paid to the mouth. After all, the animatronic would be delivering spoken dialogue, and a simple mouth opening and closing could be distracting. An intense focus was made to ensure the figure could believably shape the vowel sounds A, E, I, O, and U. For this increased and specific motion, Rogers placed small actuators on the corners of Mr. Lincoln's mouth. This would allow the lips to curve and bend appropriately, adding extra validity to the performance. When Imagineers finally had all of the internal mechanisms ready to be placed, they realized a small issue. They didn't have enough space to house all the machinery. Some special sculpting tricks were made to provide additional space within the head, plus a slight addition of height was given to help the historically tall president carry that stature on stage. The true-life Lincoln stood 6'4". Disney's version stands 6'7". Walt's Mr. Lincoln is truly larger than life. Imagineers programmed each of these movements to a recorded message. The oration delivered by the Mr. Lincoln animatronic would be an amalgamation of 5 different Abraham Lincoln addresses dating from as far back to 1838 all the way to 1864. Notably absent was Lincoln's arguably most recognized speech, the Gettysburg Address. These great moments were woven together seamlessly by screenwriter James Algar, who worked them into a cohesive piece of American history. Lincoln's words, shaped by Algar, would total 5 minutes and 15 seconds. So Imagineers had a believable Mr. Lincoln before them, and they had a message, but it would all be useless if they could not find the right person to truly bring him to life, to truly give him a voice. For Walt, it was always going to be actor Royal Dano. Dano was similar in appearance to Lincoln, and his voice had a slick northern drawl to it that was warm, reserved, and sincere. It was Dano's prior work portraying Lincoln, a role he would play multiple times throughout his career that Disney had seen years previous that had solidified the position for him. Dano was able to bring the words of Lincoln to life in a remarkable way. In his rich cadence, he gave a peaceful gravity to Lincoln's words, even before the visual representation of the audio animatronic was added.
If any personal description of me is thought desirable, it may be said I am in height 6 feet 4 inches. Yours very truly, A. Lincoln.
Perhaps just as stirring as Mr. Lincoln's remarks would be the theatrical pre-show before them. The film featured a moving score by composer Buddy Baker, archival paintings and photographs of the time, and careful recounts and narration by both Royal Dano and iconic Disney voice artist Paul Frees. This was among Paul Frees' first appearances in the park, and he would soon find immortal vocal popularity in several attractions already in production at Disneyland.
Welcome, foolish mortals.
The short presentation details a selected history of Abraham Lincoln, covering aspects of his youth, his career, and the most challenging parts of his presidency. It served as a fitting prologue to the great moments about to come. In the production phase of the film, it was suggested that Walt himself do the narration for the program. He responded sharply, saying, "What would people think of me, Walt Disney, putting myself on a par with Abraham Lincoln?" Walt had a great admiration and respect for Lincoln, a special humility and esteem he could not share for himself. The audio-animatronic Mr. Lincoln was a true trial and error, and in classic Disney fashion, it stayed that way until just before opening. The first preview of the attraction went horribly, as the mechanics were malfunctioning and the audio-animatronic was not performing exactly as designed. Rather than letting the show go on in an uncertain manner, Walt optioned to go out and inform the audience awaiting, including several representatives for the state of Illinois, that the preview would be disappointingly canceled. Walt was committed to excellence. Rather than roll the dice here, he made the tough decision to ensure that a Walt Disney presentation would be the best presentation. Of course, the kinks were all worked out by the time of the official fair opening, and on April 22nd, the curtains rose to reveal the first ever full-body audio-animatronic, who stands to deliver great moments with Mr. Lincoln. It instantly became one of the most popular attractions of the entire fair. Naturally, there would always be a place for Mr. Lincoln at Disneyland, and during the production of the World's Fair program, 2 audio-animatronic Mr. Lincolns were manufactured. The slightly more advanced of the 2 made its way to Walt's Park, where it opened on July 18, 1965 in the Main Street Opera House in Town Square, a decade and a day after Disneyland's first opening day celebration. As guests entered into the pre-show area, they'd be met with presidential artifacts and a window overlooking the nearly 12-foot-long, 5-foot-tall model of the White House. The show itself was housed in a 500-seat theater filled with top-of-the-line, high-class theater chairs, a stage adorned with nearly 150 yards worth of fine red curtain. It was a luxurious and elegant experience that gave honor and regard to its subject. The theater is laced with carefully placed directional speakers so that Lincoln's words pack authority, and so that the choir and sweeping score can move over the audience in the stoic finale. The grand finale of the presentation concluded as the curtains in the rear unveil Mr. Lincoln against the backdrop of an American flag skyline from the vantage point of the United States Capitol Rotunda, while a rousing rendition of the Battle Hymn of the Republic floods the theater. The total runtime of the program was 12 minutes long. Themes of integrity, liberty, and justice permeated through every word. Mr. Lincoln delivered a timely message of democracy in the heat of the Cold War, and his direct message of independence spoke profoundly to the current American population even a century after his passing. Admission to the attraction was free for children 17 and under. Walt wanted to ensure that the youth would be inspired by the same man he was as a boy, and didn't want them to have to sacrifice a ticket to be used elsewhere. The junior ticket declared, "So young people may have a better knowledge of the man who played such an important part in American history." All others would spend an e-ticket. While being a tribute to the past, the audio-animatronic was revolutionary in its actualization. Using the latest in tomorrow's technology, audio-animatronics were bringing the heroes of yesterday alive. While Walt and Lincoln were 2 purely different icons, they both represented ultimate aspects of the American dream. In the Hall of Proverbial American Symbols, both Lincoln and Disney stand tall. Lincoln resonated the hope of what America could be, founded on the basic principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness instilled by our revolutionary forefathers. He challenged opposers and defended those ideals into the most horrific corners of our country's history. Walt Disney was a succeeding result of that deep commitment. In the arena of America, Walt brought creativity, imagination, and the power of possibility without limits to the table. He championed originality and brought joy to the country through his talent and visionary genius, shaping the epitome of what American culture could truly be. Walt Disney would not have been who he was without the legacy of Abraham Lincoln, and the United States of America would not be what it is today without the creative influence of the original dreamer, Walt Disney. Lincoln, in his time, fought for the thrill of common opportunity, and he led the country to a victorious solidarity. And Disney, in his time, inspired that country to dream and embrace the one-of-a-kind power of the American experience. The fusion of these American greats within Walt Disney Presents Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln is significant, and American history would surely and lastingly recollect on them with fondness inside the walls of that timeless attraction. And that, my Explorer friends, was 1965. I gotta say, I've looked at so many Civil War photos this week, guys, like a lot. All those people have been gone for like a long time, and they would have no idea about things like Star Wars or Disneyland or anything. And no one looks happy. Where was I? Oh yeah, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time in the happy place. Bye!